Hello, fifth graders. This is our last science lesson for the year. We're going to quickly wrap up with a few thoughts that kind of ties everything together from our last few weeks of lessons, and then talk about a couple of things to finish out science, and then you guys are done for the year. You have to finish this Ed puzzle, finish a reflection. You guys are all good. So let's go ahead and get started with our notes. So here's an energy pyramid like we were looking at last week. And it shows on this energy pyramid a food chain, right? You start with these producers, the prairie dogs eat these plants, and then you have your carnivores up here, these coyotes that eat your prairie dogs. And we know that as energy passes through these things, right? As energies pass from the plant to the prairie dog and the prairie dog to the coyote, we're losing the amount of energy, right? So we lose a certain amount of energy at each step of our food chains or each step of our food pyramids. They're all pretty similar, right? So a big concept that I want to finish out the year with is if you take one of these organisms out of the food chain, out of the food web, however you want to think about it, it has pretty big effects on the populations of the others, right? So think about if you were to cut the amount of producers by quite a bit. Let's say that you get rid of this bottom half, you get rid of what prairie dogs eat. What do you think is going to happen to the prairie dogs? Well, the prairie dogs aren't going to have anything to eat either. You're going to have a big die off. The populations are going to go down, right? You can't sustain prairie dogs without these grasses. So if your grasses are dying, maybe they don't have enough moisture, you can't sustain the prairie dogs. If the prairie dogs go, what happens to these coyotes? Well, the coyotes are going to have to either focus on another food source, which might deplete. Let's say we're talking about rabbits. So if the prairie dogs are gone, the coyotes are going to have to eat rabbits. Well, that's going to cause the rabbit population to go down. Either way, your coyote populations are going to go down because you're taking out energy from these energy pyramids and from these food chains. So, what I wanted you guys to think about is if you take away each of these components, how would it change? So, I'm going to ask you a few questions. And these are, you can think of as like, just to think to yourself, what do you think would happen? I'm going to ask you a few open-ended questions, and then we're going to talk about our last assignment for the year, okay? So, first question is, we're just going to look at this energy pyramid here. You have your grasses at the bottom, you have your prairie dog, as the next step, right? Because prairie dogs eat grass. And then at the very top, we have our coyotes, which eat prairie dogs. This is kind of like a food chain, right? Because the prairie dogs eat the grass, the coyotes eat the prairie dogs. It's a straight chain. It's also an energy pyramid, right? We have lots of energy at the bottom in the producers. We have lots more grasses than we do animals. And then there's fewer prairie dogs. And then there's fewer still coyotes because there's not enough energy to have more of a population, right? We have a finite means there's a specific amount of energy, and you lose a little bit at each step. So I want you to answer this question. What do you think would happen to the prairie dog population if coyotes were removed from the top of this food chain? Let's say that all the coyotes die from a disease. What do you think would happen to the prairie dog population? Okay. My next question is, if the prairie dog population gets really, really big, gets huge, it explodes, maybe because it doesn't have any predators, what do you think would happen to the producers that the prairie dogs eat? Let's think of the grasses, right? What do you think would happen to the grasses if your prairie dog population gets huge? Okay. Now that you've answered that question, what do you think would happen if your grasses got overgrazed? Let's say that 90% of your grasses are killed because, let's say, you have herbivores eating them, what do you think is going to happen to the prairie dog population? Okay. Um, so those are the big questions I want you to answer for this week. That's how we're going to wrap it up. We've talked about energy a lot, how energy moves through ecosystems, the different parts of the ecosystem, the different organisms. You guys have spent a lot of time on this, and that's going to wrap up, you can think of as this unit, okay? It's also going to wrap up all our content for the year. So here's what I'd like you to do, your last assignment for the entire year. After you get done with this Ed puzzle, I'd like you to complete the end of the year reflection. And this just makes you think a little bit about what you've learned, what you'd still like to learn in science, things like that. So I'd like you to finish the end of the year reflection. And then if you have any missing work, this is your last opportunity to get it done, right? Chromebooks, I believe, are getting collected on Thursday afternoon. So you really need to get your late work in. Get a hold of me if you have questions. Check Synergy. Synergy is going to have your most up-to-date grades. Today is Tuesday. I'm going to be putting in grades all Tuesday because I got a lot of work over the weekend from students. So by the end of Tuesday, you should have an updated grade for sure. So if you have any missing work, please get it in. The last thing I want to tell you guys is that I've really missed you over the last couple of months. School's definitely not as fun when you have to sit behind a computer and do it. So I really, really enjoyed the time I spent with you guys when we were in school. And I've really enjoyed how hard you've worked at this distance learning thing and checked in with me and really done above and beyond on getting your work in. I really appreciate it. For those of you that are going to be in Peers next year, I'm really excited to see you guys next year. I will be your 6th grade science teacher. So I'll see you again next year for sure. I hope you guys finish this year strong, and I'm hoping I can see you again sometime soon. So have a great summer. If you have any questions, let me know. Yeah, have a great summer.